Welcome to my three-part video series, Survival Tools for Parents Raising Kids with Anxiety or OCD. You're in the right place if you've ever felt frustrated, overwhelmed, or lost on how to help your child with anxiety or OCD. You're not alone. The number of kids with anxiety and OCD disorders is growing at an alarming rate around the world. Did you know that 1 out of 8 kids struggle with an anxiety disorder? And with what's happening in our world right now, that number is definitely going to go up. But the sad part is 80% of those kids are not getting treatment. The data is even worse for kids with OCD. On average, it can take a person with OCD up to 17 years to even get a proper diagnosis. Not treatment, just the right diagnosis. As a mom to 3 kids with anxiety and OCD, as well as being an anxiety and OCD child therapist, I find these numbers unacceptable. And so should you. We have to do better for our kids. Did you know that the majority of child therapists out there are given very brief, if any, training on how to treat anxiety in graduate school? And OCD is even worse. Graduate schools almost never cover exposure response prevention, ERP, which is the only evidence-based treatment approach for OCD. So the scary reality is we have all these therapists out there who don't even know how to diagnose, let alone treat OCD. And what's even worse is that many of them think that they do. That's a recipe for disaster. So even if you're one of the lucky few who are able to find a child therapist during this worldwide shortage of child and adolescent therapists, you can't guarantee that they have the solid training and expertise to help your child. So if you're a parent who doesn't like to leave your child's well-being solely in someone else's hands, especially if you don't know how to tell if they're qualified, you're about to get the tools and strategies to help your child directly. In my practice, I have seen over and over again that kids that do better are the ones with parents who make it their number one priority to learn how to help their child directly. Even with the best therapists in the world, kids won't get better without the direct support of their parents. By the time you finish this entire series, you'll have a complete understanding of exactly how to support your child with anxiety or OCD and what tools you need to do just that. Like Sophie, she lives in South Africa, a country that doesn't have a lot of resources for children's mental health.
It took me a very long time to get my daughter diagnosed, about 4 years. And I really was at my wit's end on how I'm going to support my child, how I'm going to do ERP, how I'm just basically going to parent a daughter with OCD in a country that has little to no resources.
It took her over 4 years to just get her daughter diagnosed. My resources helped her realize that her daughter didn't just have anxiety, but that they had completely missed her OCD. The guidance she'd been given was making the situation actually worse, not better, so she did what any caring parent would do. She took matters into her own hands. She didn't wait for help. She didn't sit idly by as her daughter got worse and worse. She took the initiative and joined the AT parenting community and learned what she needed to do to help her child directly. Luckily, she eventually did find a great therapist, but that was only because she knew exactly what to look for and the right questions to ask. And she also realized her daughter's psychiatrist wasn't a good fit. The more you know, the more you'll be able to spot when someone isn't well equipped to treat your child. A year and a half later, Sophie's daughter is thriving and her anxiety and OCD symptoms are well managed. Sophie took what she learned and created a home environment that helped her daughter work on her issues head on. Now, Sophie has been a source of support and wisdom to other parents in the AT parenting community. So why do some kids get better, like Sophie's daughter, while others continue to spiral downward? Because developing a therapeutic approach in your home is the only way to successfully address your child's anxiety or OCD. Anxiety and OCD is a family affair, whether we want that or not. And as parents, we have a critical role to play. We just have to learn what it is. If you've ever been a parent who stood by helplessly watching as your child started to drown in anxiety or OCD, then chances are you can relate to what happened with my son. It started with him having fears about where his food came from. And then it moved to fears that he was going to choke on his food. And then the fear of throwing up took over. And along with that came the concern that his food tasted weird and it was too chewy. He went from a healthy growing boy to all skin and bones, like overnight. I was so worried. I had seen kids like this drop so much weight that they needed to get a feeding tube. I wanted him to see a therapist outside of me because I'm his mom. So I took him to one therapist, and after a few sessions, I knew she was doing more harm than good. OCD has a very specific treatment protocol, one that if not followed correctly could actually make the issues worse. So we stopped going, and I decided I would have to help him myself. It made me wonder, how many parents wouldn't have a clue if treatment wasn't appropriate or worse, was harmful. I didn't want my son ending up being a statistic. Suicide rates are skyrocketing. It's currently the third leading cause of death in adolescents and young adults. And having mental health issues puts him at an even higher risk. And I knew I couldn't afford to be casual about his struggles. I also knew that even if I put him on medication to help with his issues, only half of the kids will see improvement with an SSRI. So no matter what we decided to do, I knew a key component was giving him my support at home. And I was fortunate. I knew what to look for, and I also knew how to help him at home. So I started to pull him into my home office a few times a week for some sessions. He moaned about talking. He didn't want to discuss it. He tuned out as I talked. I felt like he wasn't soaking up anything I said. And I realized after a month of trying that I had more of an impact when I talked to him in the moment, when he was in the mood to talk, or when he was having a hard time and he wanted my help. I was a better coach when the issue was unfolding right in front of me and we can work through it together. It took time, but he did start opening up to me. We built more trust, we developed a way to communicate, and eventually he was willing to take challenges to face his fears. I started to realize just how important the role of the parent is in the child's success. Not just my child, but in any child with anxiety or OCD. I always knew that, but my own personal experience solidified that belief. And now I help other parents do what I've done for my own child. Now, some of you might relate to this story, but some of you might be sitting there thinking, Natasha, I've noticed a few things, but it's not that bad. Well, good. I want to commend you because your intuition is picking up on something that maybe isn't too bad yet. But I don't need to tell you that if a boulder was rolling down a hill, it would be a heck of a lot easier to stop it now when it's at the top of the hill than once it is picking up speed going 50 miles per hour. So you are in the right place. And maybe some of you hearing this are sitting there saying, oh, Natasha, that boulder is already at full speed. This is too bad. This is out of control. There is nothing I can do. Well, that's what Susie thought too. Her 16-year-old had such severe OCD, he was literally a prisoner in his own home. But the support and tools she got inside the community was enough to give her hope again.
What I found in the few months that I've been part of this community is that I've been able to express my concerns and my frustration that I have with OCD and the lack of information out there. I've been able to tell my story in details and not be afraid that I'm going to be chastised or criticized. I've been able to get guidance from other parents through their shared experience. I know I have a long way to go, but I know that I can do this because now I have a support group. I have a place to go to when I'm concerned or I'm struggling, and I feel safe to speak up and share my experience with others and know that I'm not alone in this world. I'm not alone struggling with my child. When I started, I lost all hope. And you gave it back to me.
It's been an absolute joy. I've learned so much. The support is fantastic. It's just been life-changing for my daughter.
I learned long ago that life doesn't throw any problems that you aren't already capable of handling. It's just sometimes you simply need a few tools and the courage to ask for help. Well, if you're asking and you're ready to receive, let's continue. So where do you begin? You need to stop and take an assessment of what you're dealing with. Often as parents, we try to conquer our children's anxiety or OCD without surveying the situation. We see our children's pain and their struggles, and we just want it to end. We want to take it away from them. But we can't do that. We're in the passenger seat, and they are in the driver's seat. They are the only ones that can truly help themselves, even if we want to lean over and take over the wheel. But you do play a critical role. You are in the passenger seat with a map or in control of the GPS. Without you, your child wouldn't know which direction to head, and that could be disastrous. A good therapist, a good qualified therapist, is super helpful. They help your child's car stay on the track. They make sure they aren't going to drive off the road. They map out the big route so they know where they are headed. But most people, who are lucky to have a therapist, only see them about an hour a week. Can you imagine if you were on a road trip and your GPS only gave you directions every 8 hours? What happens the rest of the time? How do you know where to go or when to turn? That's where you come in. Every week, you spend 168 hours with your child. Your therapist spends one of those 168 hours with them. You do the math. Who's in a better position to control the GPS? That is why, even if you have a skilled therapist working with your child, you need to be just as skilled. You need to know what to do the 167 other hours during the week so you can effectively support your child. Now you might be thinking, seriously, this sounds like more work. I'm already exhausted and now you want me to be an anxiety or OCD expert? I'm actually talking about a plan to reduce your exhaustion. Exhaustion comes from not knowing what to do. Exhaustion comes from not having a plan. Exhaustion comes from seeing the big problem, but not knowing the small steps that will lead to big improvement. The more you know, actually the less exhausted you'll be, and the more progress you'll start to see. And it really isn't rocket science. I have spent years taking all these concepts and breaking them down in simple, easy, digestible ways for parents to implement right away so they can hit the ground running. The only difference between me and you is some simple knowledge, and knowledge that is simple but often counterintuitive. Often the very thing we think will help our child can actually make it worse. So here's our first step. We need to check out our GPS and our driver. Let's talk about you, our GPS first. How much do you understand about anxiety or OCD? Are you a compass? Do you have an understanding of the major direction you should move in? Maybe your child hasn't been diagnosed with anxiety or OCD, but you're growing more and more concerned each day. Perhaps family and friends try to tell you not to worry, but you feel in your gut that there is something wrong. Maybe you've left it up to the therapist to address. Or worse, you're on a waiting list to see a therapist, but your child continues to get worse and worse in the meanwhile. Or maybe you've been hoping it'll all just go away. Maybe it's a phase, or maybe it's something they'll grow out of. We've all been there. We've all started as a compass. Or are you a map? Maybe you have a pretty good understanding of anxiety or OCD, but you've stayed just one step ahead of it. Maybe you only understand your child's specific issues, but you don't know how anxiety or OCD can morph and pop up in other ways and in other themes. Maybe you just follow the lead of your child's therapist and assume that they'll involve you if it was really needed. Like Molly, when she joined the community, she was 3 or 4 years into her journey. She was very knowledgeable about her child's struggles, but it wasn't until we covered a new theme in one of our classes that she started to have a light bulb moment.
When I joined your community, I think it was in January, because we were 3-4 years into our journey, we had a lot of information. And what I like about the community is we dig even deeper. So we've dug deeper into the different forms of OCD, and one of them was your mini moral OCD course.
Her daughter had some of these issues. So to be proactive, she thought she would just have a discussion with her and see what her daughter said. But to her surprise, her daughter revealed that she really struggled with all the things we had talked about in that class.
And at the beginning, when she was young, I didn't realize it was moral OCD, but we had a lot of apologizing, a lot of telling on herself, 50 to 100 times a day over and over.
Yeah.
So we got that under control. And then there's always been a little confessing through the years. And then just within the last couple months, she's in middle school. And so she's been hanging out with her friends, and she has realized that she will answer one of their questions. It can be something as simple as, hey, what's your favorite movie? And she'll say a movie, and then her OCD immediately says, are you sure? Are you sure that's the right movie? Are you telling them the truth? You better make sure. So she's questioning herself. Sometimes she says she feels like it's lying, or if she's, being a good person and telling the right thing. And her compulsion is to immediately say, I take that back. And then she switches it to something else.
Yeah.
And so she brought that to my attention, as well as she feels like she has to be overly kind with her manners. So with a teacher, or maybe a waitress at a restaurant, or, a cashier at a grocery store or something, she feels like she has to be overly kind. And then also they have to be looking her in the eye. And if they're not looking her in the eye, then she doesn't feel like she's been a good person and kind enough. So in the past, I would have never known that was OCD or part of moral OCD. And because of your mini course and the things I've learned in it, and some of the things you've talked about as well, I immediately realized what it was. And I just happened to, a couple months ago, share some of those things with her, because I thought, we've definitely seen moral OCD in her, and I want her to be aware a little bit. I didn't share all of the ugly stuff about moral OCD, but the things I could, and she picked up on it right away. So we've been working on it the last couple weeks, and it's getting better. We still have some work to do, but she did realize that that's what she was doing. So
those symptoms could have gone undetected and untreated for years. But because Molly was committed to fully understanding anxiety and OCD, not just the parts her daughter had, but any possible symptom, she was able to catch a growing weed before it grew out of control. Some parents are a compass, some are a map, and some are a GPS. When you are a GPS, you fully understand the inner workings of anxiety or OCD. You know not only how it shows up in your child, but you know what to look for if it morphs into other themes as well. You're able to create a home environment that will therapeutically support your child's long-term success. So which one best describes you? Are you a compass, a map, or a GPS? Regardless of where you are, we can get you where you need to be. But first, we have to check in with the other piece of the puzzle, our driver, your child. Where are they? Because even if you had the best GPS in the world, you aren't going anywhere if the driver doesn't have their foot on the pedal. So let's see what's going on with them. Is your child's foot on the brake? Do they get angry when you bring up their anxiety or OCD? Do they just want you to leave them alone? Do they want you to accommodate their issues? Does your family feel trapped, maybe even controlled by your child's anxiety or OCD? Or is your child's foot on the gas? Are they able to talk about their issues? Do they ask for help? Even if they're nervous about working on it, do they want help? Are they willing to try some things you suggest and take a leap of faith? Or is your child's foot off the pedal because they are cruising down a hill? Have they been crushing therapy or the approaches you taught them? Are all the symptoms going away and they don't feel like they have to work on it? Do they just need some encouragement to keep doing the work to keep anxiety or OCD at bay? Which one sounds like your child? We have to know where they are in order to get them where you want them to be. You can't expect a child to follow your GPS instructions when their foot is firmly on the brake. By knowing where you are and where your child is, we now know where we have to focus our attention. If you want some help figuring out where you and your child land, take my quiz linked below. Understanding where you are will help propel you where you want to be. And I've also thrown some roadside assistance your way. I've created a PDF with some of the best anxiety and OCD resources out there. But I would caution you to hold off diving too deep into those resources until you've completed the entire series and I've helped you develop your own roadmap. I've done all the heavy lifting to make this as simple as possible. Although you're like most who are already starting to see the importance of developing your own strategy at home to help your child with anxiety or OCD, you may be thinking, but Natasha, I can barely get my kids to talk to me about their issues. How am I going to actually get them to work on it? And plus, I don't have what it takes to help them. I'm not a therapist. I'm not an expert. Well, that's why in the next video, I'm going to give you 3 simple hacks that will show you how to improve communication with even the most tight-lipped child and how to create small goals that even the most unmotivated child would be willing to do. And by the end of this next training, you'll start to see just how simple it is to start feeling like you are making some traction, no matter where you're starting on your journey. I know you're committed to helping your child with anxiety or OCD, but it's important to realize that what I teach may be simple, but there is no magic formula. Yes, many parents start to see progress right away, but it will take time and it will require you to be all in, being committed, willing to do whatever it takes to help manage your child's anxiety or OCD. So you have to decide, are you a parent who is committed to do whatever it takes to improve your child's anxiety or OCD? Are you willing to try new things and new approaches? Or are you what I call in my practice a yeah butter? Yeah butters, yeah, but that won't work because, yeah, but I can't because, yeah, I tried that, but. If you're a self-proclaimed yeah butter, then I can't help you. I can't help those that don't want to help themselves or their children. But if you're committed and you are all in, then it's time to get to work. And I'll see you in the next video.